call, please. Public Works Committee. Mr. Wolverton.
Here.
Mrs. Deere.
Here.
Mr. Sims.
Here.
Mrs. Nelms.
Here.
And Mr. Hart.
Here.
We have 5.
All right, can I have a motion to dispense the reading and approval of the minutes from March 6th?
So moved. Second.
All right. Motion by Counselor Nelms, second by Counselor Harden. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That is 5-0. All right, old business 170223, request for permission to work in the right-of-way at the American Legion building at 4 Hollywood Boulevard. Counselor Andrews?
Berkeley, are we good for him to drop this?
Yeah.
All right.
Because we ultimately decided we didn't need it.
Because we're going to do the work on the sidewalk.
In the city
and
right away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to drop this. 170223.
Move to drop by Counselor Harden, second by Counselor Sims. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, 5-0 to drop.
Just
New
a quick
business.
question, Mr. Chairman.
What's that?
So I just want to make sure we don't need, I know that we're funding it in finance for the project, but we don't need permission to work the road.
No, we're working.
Because it is our road. Okay.
We're doing it ourselves.
Okay, I just want to make sure. we're not missing
I
it.
think it sounds like the improvements to the sidewalk.
And they're going to look great.
Yeah.
And they're going to do the rest of, from the end of our right of way to the building, they're going to do that landscaping, and that's going to be
Okay,
with help
perfect.
from Commissioner
Okay, I just wanted
Ammons.
to make
And we
sure.
ultimately decided that they won't need to be in the city right away to do any of their work. so.
And Kale, Berkeley was going to talk with you about a pipe bollard for the Chevron, to cut off that access to the Chevron, so.
Yeah.
Probably need one.
Yeah. Okay.
My mind it was.
All right, move into new business 090323, request for permission to work in the right of way adjacent to 924, 926, and 930 Oxmoor Road. This is coming to us from Matt Shelby, Shelby Contractors, and Wyatt Pugh with the Permits and Inspections Department.
Matt Shelby's here. He can,
Yeah, so we're renovating 930 Oxmoor Road, and this is the I guess where St. Charles runs into the building.
Sign it, please. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
So our request is to have a right-of-way use agreement put in place. We have very limited site access. We have, I think, one loading dock delivery drive in the back, which is where we have our dumpster currently parked. And so, as we renovate this building, there'll be 3 tenants that come online. We currently are working on the Odie's space, which is the one on the corner. And so there are times where we will need to receive material access. We will need to be in these parking spots to either get material in or have a lift working on something on the building. And so this came up a couple weeks ago. We had a stone delivery, and we realized that we need to have an indemnity agreement in place for a right-of-way use agreement. So we're here today requesting that to happen. I can certainly appreciate that this is a congested area. We don't need to shut this down all day, every day, but there will be times where, in the interest of safety, we need to ideally shut it down and fence it off temporarily to receive deliveries. So that's the request for today.
What do you perceive to be the longest period of time that you'd be needing to close it? Are we talking for like an hour or two at a time, or?
It's a good question. I would say it would be longer than an hour or two. It could be a day if we're getting a delivery. Just where this came up, we got a delivery of stone to backfill trenches for plumbing excavations. That takes a period of time to get the delivery, get it in place. So I would, at a minimum, I think I'd request a 24-hour shutdown. It can be subject to getting approval before we shut it down. Whatever is how Homewood typically operates.
Yeah. Mr. Kendrick, how would we operate if we're opening and closing potentially multiple times?
Go through building inspection, yeah.
I'm wondering if it's not possible just to do it toward the back corner of the building, closer to where your dumpster is located, and then there are no parking spaces that will be affected, and I don't know if we'd still need any kind of agreement for that.
We'd probably
Would
still
we?
be city right
Okay,
away.
using the sidewalk and,
Are you saying on the St. Charles side?
Yes, and I mean, I know it is.
The back alley there, I guess?
Well,
Is
just.
that what you're?
Right, on St. Charles headed north, where, on the back, by your back alley, if you can't accept deliveries at that corner as opposed to up on the street corner, Main Street corner.
It's certainly something to check out and to try. I guess a concern would be, as we are physically getting materials into, just for instance, this space, we're gonna have to come around, and whether we're on the sidewalk or in these parking spaces, I would assume either one is city property. And we are very accustomed to controlling pedestrians to keep out of our work zone, but in the interest of having I think the goal for today is to have the indemnity agreement in place so that if we get into another situation, we can request the shutdown. So I'm a little bit new to this with the city of Homewood, whatever the legal mechanism is. I'm not one to shut it down for the whole duration, and honestly, there's 3 tenants coming, only one is underway. We will be out here working.
Pretty consistently, you'll be there for the next.
I'd say potentially through the end of the year, just given the world we're in and financing, et cetera. So I'd like to have a mechanism in place so that when we need to shut something down, we can notify the fourth floor and request it, or whatever you guys say is normal that makes sense.
I mean, are you asking for just the width of one parking space, or you're not sure about that?
Ideally, it'd be the length of the building,
Okay.
because we'll have to get into each of these 3
Yes.
spaces. So for a contractor to get materials into this building,
I mean-
we're gonna have to come around and come in. So there'd be some amount of time where we would need to have access to the front of the tenant space.
During lunch, that's pretty extreme.
Well, and I would say, I mean, if there is a way to unload at least around the corner, it sounds like any kind of delivery you're planning to disperse that day. The parking is what I'm hearing people rumble about the most. I think eating up 7 or 8 spots for an entire day is going to be a big ask, and it's going to peeve a lot of people pretty quickly.
I wonder if you could do it between 7 and 11
And
in the
Andrew,
morning.
my concern about the parking spaces is more how congested it is and the site. Because I've been down there when there was something on the end there, and you can't see around it, and it's pretty tough to get out of there anyway. That's my main concern about it being there frequently or for a long time, a long period of time at those peak hours.
So it won't come into play for conduit deliveries or flooring. It's going to be the bigger bulk materials, like we're pouring concrete and we've got to get the truck close to the door and get concrete in there. Gravel delivery is another obvious example. So it's not going to be all day, every day, and honestly, it doesn't have to be very often, but there will be times where, even if we had the gravel dumped around the side, we still are going to have to use something to get the gravel from there over and in.
Right.
We do have the backloading dock. We do have access through a common corridor to the rear of these spaces. So again, we can minimize the impact, but the reality is there will be some times where we're going to need to come in through the front.
Is there a schedule that would come into play as to a time frame that Wyatt and them could have if June 1st through 3rd, you're going to be doing concrete, so that it would, I reckon,
Post it.
it would seem a little bit more practical if we could have or if we could work with some type of schedule that's provided that allows you, 4 or 5 hours in the morning on those 2 or 3 days that you could come in, pull a truck in, do the concrete, and then come out.
Yep.
I mean, I would think that would be something maybe Wyatt on your end that would be probably more helpful, where they're not getting phone calls about, because I'm like Ms. Gear said, that the earlier it is, the better it is for you guys, because starting at about 10:30 or 11 is when things pick up, and then again, after school in the evenings. So I think I would think if you could work a schedule with White that could kind of dictate 4 or 5 hours this morning, that you're gonna do concrete pours, which don't get me wrong, I know things come up, but I think that may be something that may
More
be
palatable.
more palatable type situation that could help.
And I agree with that as well, simply because if you're talking about pouring concrete and moving gravel and everything else, that means you're gonna be taking up the sidewalk too.
Yeah.
So not only are you taking 7 spaces out front, you're also negating the 2 parking lots we have on the side, because there's
Keep
nowhere else.
pedestrians.
Can't go there.
You can't park there to get to everything else. So you're honestly taking up,
You gotta cross those.
40, 50 spaces, not just 7. So that's kind of where we're.
Yeah. Well, so Kel said the net was on the head. If you're parking over here, we need to redirect them around. And again, worst case scenario is the gravel and concrete. And so I think we have one more gravel pour left one more concrete pour left for Odie. So, one more time. I honestly can't think of another instance that is of that magnitude. The majority of everything else can probably be handled through the back. But we will have that same situation with the center tenant and this tenant on this end. This is the proposed frothy monkey. I don't know how much that's done. So it's coming. So I think the goal for today was to go on and have an agreement in place, and it can be subject to a schedule that then we call in advance, hey, 2 weeks from now, we're gonna pour, let's notify the public. Certainly happy to do all of those things. We just want to get on the front end so that we're not coming back to present here, for a, kind of minor event.
So, and just I have a few points to follow up. So number one, Mr. Kendrick, to what he's saying, you're saying you can write it in to where, we designate Wyatt with the authority to approve those timeframes upon request?
Yes.
Okay. And then kind of related to that, I know that when you had stone before, there was some temporary fencing as a barrier. Just want to make sure that that's coordinated as well so that it doesn't go all the way towards St. Charles to where it does create a visibility issue. If we need to, write that in however needed, I'd like to make sure that that's taken into consideration. And then kind of bigger picture too, I think as we're talking about this, and as the mayor referenced, we're really talking about more than 7 parking spaces if there's restricted access to concrete pouring and so forth. But just at face value, if we're talking about these 7 parking spaces primarily for temporary closure, and that being a concern, when there's 3 tenants vacant, imagine what the future parking situation of this corridor is gonna look like once those are occupied, plus the Edgewood, the former, Cupcake location and Slice. So we really need to be thinking about what the plan is. I mean, I don't know if the existing Dawson agreement is still in effect for, parking to go to the Dawson deck.
There's no agreement with Dawson.
But we're gonna need to come up with a plan to address parking, because whereas before this was an antique mall, now we're talking about a restaurant that's open. What are the anticipated hours of Frothy Monkey? Do you know that?
They certainly serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
And Odie's as well, right? So we're
I
gonna
don't know
have.
if Odie's does breakfast, but lunch
I'm
and
sorry,
dinner.
that.
Yes.
So we're gonna have a space that's, whereas before, there were kind of rotating hours for peak parking for different businesses. We're gonna have a lot of businesses where peak time is in the evening, and I think we need to look at that as well. And that's just kind of like, as we're talking about this property, it's important to keep that bigger perspective in mind.
Yeah, that's different from what you're after right now, so we'll deal with that.
It is, but only the perspective of the conversation is, if losing 7 spaces is an issue with 3 vacancies, then obviously when we have 3 tenants in, it's gonna be that 7 and a lot more that's occupied.
No question. So, Mr. Shelby, you've heard from us. How do we minimize this and still get you what you need? I mean, I think a schedule's exactly right that we can look at. And, pouring concrete early in the morning, especially as we get in the summer, they like pouring early in the morning.
Yes, sir.
So it's really a lot of folks showing up here, starting at 11:30, and then back probably, I mean, kids come through here 4 o'clock and on.
Yeah.
So it's finding some way to get this and get it under a schedule that Wyatt can look at and say, okay. And I think maybe we've got to give a flyer or some notice to the tenants, hey, we'll be here for a little while, you know, just to keep them from screaming, yelling at us. But,
I mean, that all makes sense to me. I guess my anticipation coming into the meeting today is that I need to at least get an indemnity agreement in place with the city, and then each individual shutdown can be subject to approval with Mr. Pugh, if that's helpful. And again, our goal isn't to shut it down all day, every day. It's just, you know, another good example is when we get rooftop units coming in, they're going to show up on a truck and maybe a crane truck. We got to make a pick. It doesn't have to take 12 hours, and we can certainly schedule to try to do that in the early morning hours. But, you know, things happen, the truck gets stuck in traffic, who knows? Same with concrete. You know, we can get on the docket to pour at a certain time, but, you know, this is a small fish in the sea of construction. We get bumped. So I think having an agreement in place, subject to, you know, whatever advance notice, whether it's 1 week, 2 week, whatever it is, and then, you know, I think you guys have our contact info. If something comes up, we can react to it immediately. We hopefully prove with the gravel situation that we'll jump on it if there's an issue with the city. Our goal is not to ruffle feathers and to do things correctly. So if something comes up, we'll react.
concrete's gonna be the toughest thing, because they got about 30 minutes to pour that concrete, I think. I mean, there's some period of time, once they've mixed it into the thing, and they keep turning it, but
Yeah.
there's a period of time where they've gotta pour it, or it's over. I mean,
That's true. But the good news on these are existing buildings, and it's an existing slab, so we're cutting up for the new plumbing run, so it's a 2-foot wide trench for the length of, so it's 7 yards, one truck. It's not too bad.
they can pour that pretty quickly.
So, Mr. Kendrick, have we had, I don't remember a development like this that would shut down parking lots and commerce like this is being proposed. I mean, do we have any examples of this being something that was a workable situation?
Not that I can recall.
I mean, in my time on the council, I've never seen a proposal where you just say, we'll give you an indemnity agreement to work in our right of way whenever you feel like it. I wouldn't support this unless we had a specific schedule. And I know that's difficult to do, but we have got to be able to plan for when you're going to be doing this. And I need our city officials to agree that this is not going to shut down an entire parking lot plus 7 spaces. So I'm not feeling comfortable with this, and I'd like to look at any other alternatives that might be out there. But we work too hard to get these parking lots over there, and to not even have access to them when you're working there is that I can't even tell you how many calls we're going to get of angry people who can't get to wherever they want to get. So those are just my thoughts. I just don't remember any type of development asking for something of this.
Is there any, would there be any conditions that they could pour at night when nobody's parked there, needing to park there, or anything like that?
I think it's
No,
more
park there
likely
at
they'll
night.
pour at 5, 6 in the morning.
So you typically want sunlight hours to be able to finish your work.
Yeah, I think they'd more likely do it in the early morning.
Early morning is preferable.
Yeah. I think that makes more sense, especially as we get into the summer.
Yeah.
They're used to that.
I can certainly appreciate this as a congested area, and by no means am I asking to shut this down all day, every day. But there are certainly going to be times where we are going to have to be in that spot to get materials in the building or on the roof. And so, again, the goal for this conversation is to figure out a legal means for that to happen. And I recognize this is Homewood, but this is normal in our world. We do a lot of work downtown city of Birmingham, and so we get permits to park a dumpster in parking spots. You know, this is different, it's unique, it's Homewood, it's not City of Birmingham, I agree with all of that. But this isn't atypical for us to be asking.
And I would tell you that, you know, a concrete truck probably is really only, and maybe a crane taking up 3 spaces, a concrete truck taking up 2. I mean, I don't think you're gonna need more than that at any one time, I don't think. Do you agree with that, or? All 7 doesn't seem to make as much sense except maneuverability.
Just to talk through it, I'm not lobbying for more here, but a concrete truck is, when it pulls in to pour out, it's gonna need to pull in, and then it's gonna need to be able to get out. It's not like it's, you know, it's probably longer than 1 space is, so I don't know if it can just nose in.
I was thinking backing it, but.
Well, yeah, I mean, all of these are great ideas, so we can kind of tease those out or test them out. Again, the goal for the day is to figure out, knowing that something is coming, what do we want to get in place now to have some flexibility so that when it is time, we can. And again, I mean, all this can be subject to a 2-week look ahead with Mr. Pugh.
Is there any way to give them permission to work in the right-of-way, but then give advance notice enough so it comes to committee and you have an estimate of the time you need and the days you need, or, you know, whatever time you're looking at it? And is it something that you need to do every couple of weeks, probably, or do you think more often than that, or? I mean, does that make any sense?
I think from a construction schedule standpoint.
It needs to just be handled administratively.
Yeah, it's really.
Well, okay,
those
but
subcontractors
what do
are
we
tough.
say, how do we say, word this so that we know what we're giving him permission to do, I guess?
Give him permission to do whatever Mr. Pugh approves.
Right, well, I don't, have we told Mr. Pugh, what we'd like it to be?
Wyatt, what do you think?
So I guess it depends on what we're talking about is about to happen. I mean, if it's a load of stone, then we would need to take care to protect the inlet. And we would need to take care to provide safety fencing around the area and perhaps some sort of detour, pedestrian detour signage to send people who are trying to park over here, to send them across the street down, maybe something like that. Is that what you mean? Like a
Well, I
plan?
mean, you know, do we want to say he can block these 7 parking places from 6 a.m. to 11 a.m. or 10:30 a.m. or, I mean, you know, I wonder how specific we want to get, or if he can do it 1 day a week for these number of hours, or I'm just not sure if that's feasible, or if we just have a discussion, we just get started and see how it goes, and if there's a problem that you see, then we talk about it again.
What is maybe the maximum length of time you foresee any individual event requiring the closure of the right of way?
I can't imagine that anything we would do would take longer than 1 day, and I think with planning, we can minimize that impact. If we get a stone delivery at 6 a.m. and we hustle to get it inside the building, then the goal would be to get it opened up by noon. I want to be a little bit careful about, you know, being able to guarantee that, because if a piece of equipment breaks, or, you know, our goal would be to minimize the impact to the city. I can appreciate this is not. Yeah. A stone delivery is a day, a half a day worth of work. The amount of concrete we're going to pour is a day or a half a day. Getting units delivered for the rooftop, you know, that is probably a 4 to 6 hour activity, but again, we can try to schedule that to happen at 6 a.m. or as soon as sunrise, as long as that's, shouldn't be an issue with the neighbors, but we can schedule that early and try to be out by lunch too.
So it seems like all of these are probably a single working day.
Right, and then how often will that happen? I would just say, you know, I mean, we want the buildings to get completed, and we'd want you to take as much into the back entry as you can. But I guess if you've got the dumpster parked, I don't know if that'll continue to be there throughout the project.
I think that's probably the least obtrusive place for the dumpster, or else I'd be asking for parking a dumpster
Well,
out
I'm
front.
just saying that would be a good place to bring things in and out of the building, but you're right.
Yes, ma'am.
Well, I don't know what other options we have.
How many more occurrences based on what your project needs to get done by the end of the year? Would you, like, can you count it out? Like, we gotta get stone one more time, we gotta do this one more time? Because I think we want to set a max of occurrences in this language as well. So could you estimate at this time how many more times this will occur by the end of the calendar year?
I could certainly put a list together outside of this meeting,
Okay.
but just kind of off the cuff. Kitchen equipment coming in, we're gonna have a kitchen hood. Those are typically a beast. They're gonna need to come in through the front door.
If you want to, outside of this
Okay.
meeting, provide this
Yeah.
before we have the resolution at the end of the week, that's fine.
Okay.
Because I think what we need is, language related to weekday, work, avoiding weekends and holidays. We're gonna stipulate safety fencing and detour signage as Mr. Pugh recommended. We wanna set a max on occurrences by the end of the calendar year. We wanna say that, no deliveries after 10 a.m. If it's something that's gonna take 6 hours, we don't wanna get it after 10 a.m. and then it continue into the next workday. We wanna get that delivery before 10, so it's all done in one day. How many instances have you already had where you've kind of used this space already in this manner?
Well, the stone delivery is what prompted this meeting.
Yeah.
We had a demo permit where we demoed the awning, and then we have put back up an awning.
Yeah.
And so we were working off of a lift. I mean, hopefully I'm not confessing my own sins here, but.
No, I mean, I live around the corner.
So-
It's been blocked a lot since you've started.
So I think, thanks for coming to us to try to work through the indemnification agreement process. And I think we can work on the language and get something workable, hopefully, that's safe and, realistic of what the challenges you're facing at the moment.
Sounds great.
We'll have to put together a list.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it
please.
sounds like, were you gonna motion?
I'm
to
motioning
move it
that with
and
those
then-
stipulations, we, approve the work in the right of way with a proper indemnification agreement, and then, the resolution will spell out those terms.
I'll second that.
Second.
So
Oh.
so that's a motion by Counselor Sims, second by Counselor Gear. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So that's 5-0.
You said you made a motion.
Yeah, so that recommendation's going out to full council next week.
Okay.
That
Let
sounds,
me ask some who owns the property. The identification will be the owner of the property.
Okay. It's Red Rock Realty.
Yeah, they probably have an
You
LLC.
send what and.
their contact.
Yeah, they will.
Yes, sir.
I'm sure an LLC can own it.
Okay. Yep, I'm sure. Let me thank you.
So essentially 6 PM next Monday, full council will vote on the item, but
Do I need to be here for that next Monday?
it might be wise to, based on the number of questions and concerns that were brought up tonight, yeah.
And then I'll email you a list of stuff to talk through this week. Okay.
Because that's what we'll be looking for on Monday.
Okay.
really.
Crossing Ts and dotting Is.
Okay. I can leave a stack of cards if anybody has any follow-up, that have any questions.
Surely wouldn't hurt, yeah.
Appreciate that.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks for y'all's time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. And with that, we stand adjourned.